Did you know there was a time where many in the church were wrong about Jesus? There were songs and sermons and rumors going around about Jesus, that he was just this good teacher or God's favored, but he wasn't really God. And that was addressed at the Council of Nicaea. Now, if you're a student of history, you might just say, that's been fixed. We addressed it and moved on. The fact of the matter is, many of us today are still making that error. Many people today say Jesus was just a good teacher or a prophet or a model, but he's not really God. Today, we're going to talk about the Arian Controversy from 325 and how that still applies to our lives today. All right, so let's break it down. The Council of Nicaea, you may be familiar with, just in name only, because Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code talked about it. Let's just say Dan Brown was wrong in his work of fiction. Surprise, surprise. But many people read the Da Vinci Code and think that his work is based in truth. The Council of Nicaea did not vote on choose who Jesus was. It did not vote on scriptures. And we'll get into some of this here in a bit, but just to kind of set the stage for context, it's important for us to kind of recognize that. Specifically, the Council of Nicaea convened in 325 because there were people going around questioning whether Jesus was actually God or if he was just a good dude. Now, the reason this is so important is because so many of us struggle with the same thing. So first, let's just look at what was the Council of Nicaea trying to do and what was the Arian Controversy. Now, if you're like me, that word Arian might be a little scary. Whenever I was in my undergrad and studying church history and I ran across the Arian Controversy, I thought they were talking about something completely different. The Arian Controversy comes from this dude named Arius, who was a teacher in the early church. He actually was a bishop, and he was teaching on Jesus, and he was talking about who Jesus is. Specifically, Arius believed that Jesus was created. He believed that God created Jesus. He didn't quite understand or comprehend the Trinity, and so one of the things that he said and believed was that if Jesus was God and the Holy Spirit was God, then somehow, some way, we were polytheistic. And there was a lot of polytheism in the area around him. And so he didn't like the concept of the Trinity and felt like he was capitulating with the culture around him if he believed that Jesus was God. And so he believed that God the Father created Jesus. Now, there were some verses that he thought supported that, and then there were others who thought that, no, he was completely wrong. So there's a guy named Athanasius who believed that Jesus was fully God. And so there were these arguments going on at for a couple of years, actually. And Arius was writing songs, and sailors would pick up these songs and start singing them. Let me read to you one of those songs. The uncreated God has made the sun, a beginning of things created, and by adoption has God made the sun into an advancement of himself. Yet the Son's substance is removed from the substance of the Father. The Son is not equal to the Father, nor does he share the same substance. God is the all-wise Father, and the Son is the teacher of his mysteries. The members of the Holy Trinity share unequal glories. So the way that Arius viewed the Trinity was that you have God, the Father, who's like really God, and then Jesus, who is this kind of separate entity. There was this argument over substance, and Arius believed that Jesus was of similar substance, but not the same substance. The Council of Nicaea, when it convened, was really arguing over this term substance. Is Jesus of similar substance, kind of like the Father, or is he of the same substance? Now, we're not going to get into the weeds of that today, but it's important to note that words matter, and the words that we use when we are inarticulate can mislead people. Arius was very articulate in what he believed, and he sent his words out. One of the things that he did was, like I said, he wrote songs. The power of songs. Wow. There's that famous line where Plato says that we need to celebrate the poets, give them a big party, and then send them out of the city because they have way too much power, that we need to exile them, get rid of them, because they can mislead a whole generation. This is what we're seeing with Arius. He takes his bad theology and sends it out in song, and he misleads a whole bunch of people. So his bad theology starts spreading around, and there was divisions in the church over what is Jesus. Is Jesus a created being of similar substance with the Father, or is he fully God of the same substance of the Father? Again, this may sound very basic, like what are we arguing over substance? But there's dramatic differences that these words lead to. So they convened the Council of Nicaea. There were around 250 pastors in the area, and they came to a place called Nicaea. In fact, they didn't just talk about this. They talked about a couple other issues, because when you get a whole bunch of pastors around together and theologians in that time period, you might as well make the best of it. And they talked about what are we to believe about Jesus? Is he a created being? Or is Jesus of the same substance as the Father? Is Jesus uncreated? Another tension that we have to think through here is what decides truth? Is there a grounding that we can lean upon, or do we just go with what the majority says? Because Arius is out there writing songs and influencing people, and there's this big groundswell of this belief in Arianism. Do we just lean into what Arius is teaching because it has this kind of popular voice? Or do we have some sort of grounding in truth? And if we have grounding in truth, what is that grounding? What is the standard by which we lean into? Historical Christianity has always leaned into the authority of the Scriptures. And that's what Athanasius, this other theologian, is confronting Arius with, the Scriptures themselves. So this is how Athanasius confronts Arius. Now we're going to read a couple verses just to kind of get us understanding of what Athanasius is saying. And again, we're going to get to how this applies to us today. But the first thing would be John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, the reason this is important is because we're talking about in the beginning. So before time, before creation, there's a whole, we could really do a word study on this. John is leaning on that phrase in the beginning of Genesis, trying to say, hey, let's hyperlink to the creation account. Jesus, the Word, is somehow in the beginning creating. And he says the Word was with God. This is a Trinitarian phrase. So the Son is with the Father, this Trinitarian unity, but the Word was God. And so Jesus, in the beginning, was God. There's not a time where Jesus wasn't God. Does this make sense? This is really important because we're not saying that somehow Jesus took on deity or somehow one day woke up and the Father favored him so much that he kind of gave him some kind of demigod status. In the beginning, before time, Jesus was God. And this is very, very important. One of the things Athanasius is pushing back against Arius. Another section of scriptures is a little longer, a couple more verses, but Colossians 1:15-20. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. And so what is Paul saying here? He is saying that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. So Jesus is the part of the Trinity that you see. The Father, you can't see the Father. The Spirit, you can't see the Spirit. But we can see the Jesus, that he was literally came in bodily form and walked among mankind. Paul also says that Jesus was the agent of creation. In verse 16, he says that in him all things were created. That somehow, some way, everything is created by Jesus, for Jesus, through Jesus, and to Jesus. And so Jesus is kind of the pinnacle of this section of Scripture, of Colossians, that talks about the supremacy of the Son. And so when we use this term, the Son, the firstborn, this is a positional term. This is not suggesting that somehow Jesus was had been given birth to by the Father, that there was a time where Jesus wasn't existing. This is a positional authority is what we're talking about here in Colossians, and this links up well with John 1:1. You could actually read the whole first chapter of John that really kind of outlines that Jesus again is in the beginning, that he was with God, that he is the Word. And then in Hebrews chapter 1, let's just start in verse 2. But in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. So we see here that Jesus is the instrument of creation, that Jesus is the creator. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. So what we're seeing here is that Jesus has a position of the Son, but he's not a created being. He has authority. He has power. He has majesty. That he is superior to angels and to humanity. So at the Council of Nicaea, all of this stuff was discussed, and what they came to was that Jesus was and is the Son of God positionally, that's his title, but that he's not a created person, and that the Trinity has existed eternally in the past, that the God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit there wasn't a time where they were created. They have existed in eternity past and will exist in eternity future. Now, why is this important? Because Jesus then is no longer this kind of like demigod. Jesus is recognized as God. He's the second person of the Trinity, and that this is not some sort of a pluralistic religion, that we don't believe in multiple gods. There's a video that I recently did on the Trinity, and what does that mean? What is and what C.S. Lewis had to say about the Trinity. Go back and check out that video where we nuance who the Trinity is and how we can understand the Trinity and what the Trinity means to you today. But as far as this discussion, I think it's important that we understand how we see Jesus reshapes our life. Why? Because if Jesus is just a good teacher, then then we don't really have to take everything that he says. We take a lot of things he says, but he's just a teacher, right? So maybe there's another good teacher out there. But Jesus says that there's no way to the Father except through him. Why? Because he is God. And that's important that we recognize. Furthermore, if Jesus is just like a good teacher or a prophet, then the morality that Jesus establishes is more suggested. This leans into subjective morality, subjective truth claims. And yet, if Jesus is God, then there is objective truth claims in what he says. Like, if Jesus is God, we have to obey his every word. If he's just a good teacher or a moral example, then maybe we can kind of skirt some certain issues that he says that we don't really like, and maybe we can lean into other things. Now, you would think that the Council of Nicaea addressed this issue in 325, and so it's not something that we have to deal with anymore. The fact of the matter is, there are still people, still voices, still organizations out there that say that Jesus is just a good teacher, or that he's a prophet, right? But he's not God. The Mormons and Jehovah's Witness and Islam all teach that Jesus is a good dude, but not God. This is the key difference between those religions and Christianity. Orthodox Christianity teaches that Jesus is God 100%, that he's 100% God and 100% man. And we have to recognize that, and we don't just fall into Jesus being a good teacher only. This is kind of the movement that we see in the 70s, right? The 1970s, where Jesus is kind of seen as this cool guy, kind of a hippie. You see this in that, Dogma, the movie, where it's Buddy Jesus. And so somehow Jesus is like this kind of cool hippie dude. He's fun to be around, and he's really cool. He doesn't really challenge you. And so all of the kind of harsh teachings that Jesus has, we scrub those away because we can get rid of them. If Jesus is not God, then whatever he's teaching that I don't like, I can set aside. And so Jesus lacks authority in our lives when we take away his deity. So it's easy to look at the Arian controversy and just say that this is just something that happened in history, right? Like, church history is cool. We like studying this stuff, but it doesn't really matter. But we have to understand that if Jesus is not fully God, then Jesus can't fully reveal God. If Jesus is not fully God, then he can't truly, fully save us. Only Jesus, who's 100% God, can reconcile humanity to God. And only Jesus, who's 100% man, can truly reconcile man to God. So it's necessary for Jesus to be both 100% God and 100% man. That's why the Arian controversy and defeating the Arian controversy is so important and still practical to us today. If Jesus is not fully God, then that means that all your worship, your identity, your hope, your future rests in something that's ultimately not real. It's not rooted in a divine, an objective authority. And the early church refused that, utilizing the authority of the scriptures. The Council of Nicaea insisted that Jesus is not a created being, that he is God. That means that when you're looking at Jesus Christ, you're not just seeing a reflection of God. You're actually seeing God himself. Hey y'all, this has been great. Thanks for joining as always. If you want us to dig deeper into like the Council of Nicaea, what were some of the other issues or some of the fallout? Maybe what were some of Athanasius' arguments against Arius? Let me know. We'd be happy to dig through some of that. Or if there are any other topics that you'd like us to talk about, we're happy to do that too. But as always, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all of that. If this has been beneficial to you, send a link to this video to one of your friends and give me a shout out. As always, love you guys, and I hope it's a great week. I'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.